Hi, so another Mrs. H Psychology video for AQA, the new spec, paper 2, gender topic. We've already done one on Kohlberg, so this is the second cognitive explanation. We've got a separate one for Kohlberg's explanation. So this one is part B, gender schema theory. So some page references. We are talking about gender schema theory, Martin and Halverson's, and also Bem's. Here are your page references. PhD is the pink-haired girl, Illuminate, revision book, those pages, Hodder, and also Illuminate online. So this is what we need to know. Some basic background information to include. So this theory, gender schema, agrees with Kohlberg's theory and that children actively seek out gender-related behavior, but they say that gender identity is the motivation to start that sex-type behavior. Okay, so it's not gender constancy, as Kohlberg says, it's gender identity, the first stage. And they say that gender identity is like a magnet for new information. So they pay more attention to activities associated with their own sex, which we could call the in-group, than the opposite sex, so the out-group. And they start to organize that into gender schemas. And remember, gender schemas are internal mental frameworks about attitudes and expectations. So the idea here is that when they see information that's consistent with their schema, they incorporate it into their schema. But if it's inconsistent, they fail to encode it. In other words, they don't remember it. What else do we need to know? Okay, so the first, gender schemas relate to activities associated with each sex. Children start to form stereotypes and learn what's okay, for example, and what's not okay for boys and girls. So, for example, it's okay for boys to play rough, but not to play with dolls, and vice versa for girls. Okay, so they're learning these gender schemas, and they're also learning gender scripts, which is the sort of behaviors that go with it. By about 6, they've got quite a sophisticated set of schemas for their own sex, but it's not until a bit later, roughly about 8 to 10, that they start to get a better one for the opposite sex. So this is like social learning theory, SLT, that it believes that gender schema theory believes that children learn gender from observing role models, but here they're saying that it's actually a much more active cognitive processing that's going on to form that gender schema. So we need some evidence to support it. Evidence from Martin and Halverson. So this was to investigate if children distort inconsistent information to fit in with their gender schemas. And basically they showed 5 to 6-year-olds pictures that were gender schema consistent. So for example, a male footballer, or gender inconsistent, for example, a male nurse. Remember, this was 1983, so some time ago, and obviously things have changed. And then they asked these children to recall those pictures a week later. And what they found was the schema consistent behaviors was recalled very well, but the inconsistent was often distorted to fit in with the schema. So for example, if they'd been shown a girl with a gun, they actually recalled a boy with the gun. So Martin and Little, another example, found preschool children under the age of 4 with no sign of understanding stability or constancy already had formed gender stereotypes about what was appropriate behavior for boys and girls. And that supports the idea that they do form these stereotypes much earlier than Kohlberg said. And this also explains why children have very rigid gender beliefs, because the inconsistent information will get rejected and they will just recall the consistent information. We've also got further support. Some believe that this complements Kohlberg's theory. So instead of them opposing each other, schema focuses on how information affects memory, whereas Kohlberg is about the motivation to learn gender. So they're not competing, they're actually extending just different areas of gender development. So some would argue that schema theory is really an extension of Kohlberg's. We do need to know some evaluations, some criticisms as well. So some people might say this is very reductionist because it's ignoring biological influences, and it is really saying that all of our gender concepts really arise from cognitive processes. Another problem is children act in gender typical ways even before they learn these gender schemas. So Eisenberg found children of 3 or 4 would justify their toy choice without even referring to gender stereotypes. And of course, we would like to bring in comparisons with other theories. So the first one we can compare is with Kohlberg. Okay, so Kohlberg, whether it's a very active actively seeking models from the environment. They both actively seek models from the environment. But the A is the age really that is in dispute. So Kohlberg believes it's gender constancy, so they have to understand this permanence before they're really going to look for those models and what that means. Whereas schema theory is saying gender identity is good enough for them to start seeking out those role models. And then you should also make comparisons with the other theories of gender development, and those you'll find on my Kohlberg video. So video 1 on the cognitive explanations.